I'm on my way to one of the most glammy venues the West End of London has ever seen. It doesn't have a stage, it doesn't have a safety curtain, it doesn't have usherettes trying to sell you a drink on a stick. But over the years, it's offered some of the best performances in town. Film stars, celebrity chefs, fraudsters, murderers, sex criminals. They've all been in the cast. So take your seats, please. It's showtime at the Savoy Hotel. The Savoy is now such a venerable, heritagey institution that it's easy to forget how revolutionary the place once was. In the middle of the 19th century, it was best to sleep in your own bed, or the bed of somebody who you knew quite well. Check into a hotel, and you probably wake up achy from the lumpy mattress and bilious from last night's dodgy chops. Most hotels had a service culture that even Oliver Twist wouldn't have put up with. But the Savoy changed all that. It offered the rich somewhere like being at home, only better. Instead of being a glum necessity of travel, like stopping at a service station, the Savoy was designed as a destination in itself. It was the first hotel that people visited even if they didn't take a room there. It offered places to eat, drink and dance, a place to gawk and be gawked at. The Savoy was also the first hotel to be lit by electricity, the first to offer 24-hour room service, the first where all the rooms had hot and cold running water and the majority had bathrooms. It was created by Richard Doyley Cart, son of a Soho fiddle salesman, opera impresario and man with acute taste in neckwear. With the financial help of his business partners William Gilbert and Arthur Sullivan, he had already built the Savoy Theatre, where Victorian England's favourite musical double act scored some of their greatest hits. The cost of the Savoy Theatre gave Gilbert what the Victorians commonly referred to as the screaming oopazootics. In fact, they argued so much about the price of the carpet that it broke up the Gilbert and Sullivan partnership for several years. So when Richard Doyley Cart decided that the Savoy Theatre would look much better with a whopping great hotel planted next to it, Gilbert kept his wallet in his waistcoat pocket. This was to be a place of conspicuous wealth, where chandeliers glittered and the wine flowed like wine. In the 1990s, the style press fawned over hip hotels where celebs and wannabes buzzed in the hope of being snapped by the paparazzi. Back in the 1890s, the Savoy pioneered the same formula. These days, you're more likely to find businessmen here or tourists taking their birthday tea. But in the past, the crowd was more flamboyant. Artistic types gathered from the surrounding theatreland. A major draw was the food. Previously, upper-class English people had preferred to entertain at home, where at least if you were poisoned, it was by your own servant. But the Savoy made eating out fashionable, and that was all due to a Frenchman who led a revolution in the kitchen, Georges-Auguste Escoffier. There was a time when the chef who received your order in the restaurant kitchen would make the whole dish from scratch. The same person would do everything from chopping the onions to sticking the apple in the pig's mouth. Escoffier abolished all that. He called his team the Brigade de Cuisine, gave everyone a different role, and invented the modern restaurant production line.
Before Escoffier, an omelette may have taken 15 minutes. Now, the very same omelette of the very same quality, this is important, only took 5 minutes. And he achieved that by having the processes run parallel to each other. So somebody would prepare the potatoes, somebody would prepare the omelette, somebody would prepare a fine truffle sauce which goes on top. And up until today, and I cannot foresee a time where this is going to change, we still work with the same structures, with the same system, and this thanks to Escoffier.
So here you are cooking in the same kitchen that Escoffier cooked in. Are you serving the same food?
Well, perceptions of our guests have changed a bit, and not everybody's in for a 16-course menu or for a cake with 38 eggs, so we have to adapt a little bit.
Like his august predecessor, Georg is from continental Europe. But in one key respect, he's different from Escoffier.
He refused to learn English. He only spoke French. He said a good kitchen cannot be translated in English, which we have proven in the meantime is not true. And he also had a kind of a joke that he said, if I learn English, I will start to cook like that.
Some of the hardware that the chefs use has survived from Escoffier's time. Savoy banquets are served from a hot plate that the master would recognise. So generations of Savoy chefs have sweated and wept in this room.
It enables me to serve 500 meals in 8 minutes. Although it is, so I have been told, over 100 years old, it works perfectly. It's in perfect working condition.
It's hard to imagine any modern piece of kitchen equipment lasting that long, isn't it?
Not at all. I would reckon a modern piece of equipment has a durability of 10, maybe 15 years. As you come a little bit closer, you can feel the heat, which is generated by steam, by the way, to keep the food hot here, yes. But at the same time fresh.
So this is a great feat of Victorian engineering. This is like the Flying Scotsman of the kitchen. Escoffier became one of the first celebrity chefs, well known for the bespoke dishes he whipped up for the royals and celebs who hung around his luxury dining trough. He flattered them shamelessly. For the Prince of Wales, he created nymphs' thighs, frogs' legs, swimming in a jelly of cream and moselle. Another dish was first served for a world-famous soprano in a swan carved out of ice. The bird was escorted by 4 liveried footmen to the table of Dame Nellie Melba. Escoffier had put peach Melba on the menu. The dame was as gobsmacked as I was, and given that the whole restaurant was applauding, she was hardly going to point out that it wasn't what she'd ordered. Escoffier went on to create Poire Melba and Fraise Melba. I'm sure he would have worked his way down to Kumquat Melba and Ugly Fruit Melba had it not all gone horribly wrong for him in 1898. Escoffier was great for the Savoy's reputation, but not for its shareholders. He might have been a culinary genius, but he was also as bent as a balloon whisk. In a single year, he took £8,000 worth of bribes from food suppliers. That's about 300 grand in today's money. It's a lot of peach Melba. Escoffier was fired in May 1898, though the affair was hushed up for decades, which was just as well, because 3 years earlier the Savoy had been named and named again in the most notorious sex scandal of the century. The trials of Oscar Wilde resulted in a public display of the playwright's dirty linen, and much of it was the Savoy's. Wilde complained that the Savoy's electric lighting was too harsh, and he couldn't see the point in hot running water. I mean, why bother to turn your own taps when you could just ring for somebody to pop in with a jug? But Wilde was mad keen on room service. When he and his lover Bosie Douglas stayed here for a month in 1893, they gorged themselves on fine food and champagne and telegraph boys. All the gory details emerged in the boys' testimonies at the trial. They talked of expensive wine and Vaseline. One of the Savoy's page boys is reported to have said, "Mr. Wilde is always kissing me, but he always tips me 2 and 6. The judge seemed more scandalised by the hotel's high prices. "Chicken and salad for 16 shillings is very high," he said. "I'm afraid I shall not be having supper there myself." The price he extracted from Oscar, however, was much higher. Wilde was hardly the only scandalous guest in the Savoy's history. In 1919, the body of the cabaret star Billy Carlton was found in one of the hotel's serviced apartments. Cocaine overdose was thought to be the cause, her film star boyfriend the supplier. 4 years later, an even more gruesome case was to come. One hot Monday lunchtime in July 1923, the restaurant band leader came up to the table of a female diner named Marguerite Farmy and asked her if she fancied a tune in her honour. "Thank you very much," she said, "but I'm afraid my husband is going to kill me in 24 hours, and I'm not very anxious for music." That night, in the middle of a thunderstorm, of course, a waiter heard gunshots coming from her room. But Madame Farmy's prediction was wrong. in one crucial detail. It was her husband, a wealthy Egyptian called Ali Kamel Fahmy Bey, who was found gargling his own blood on the floor of Suite 41. By his side, with her frock a messy write-off and a gun in her hand, was his beautiful wife. It happened up there, in a room that's no longer open to the public. Marguerite Fahmy claimed that she'd been treated by her husband in a manner that would have sent a harem catamite to an industrial tribunal, and she had the hemorrhoids to prove it. She'd converted to Islam when she married. The papers fantasised that this was a case of white slavery, that Marguerite Fahmy was a prisoner in her marriage and must have acted in self-defence. And yet, she also claimed that she'd shot her husband accidentally, 3 times. She claimed that she'd been shaking a gun in front of the window, that it had gone off, but that somehow the bullet had made its way back into the room and into her husband's neck. 2 more followed the same trajectory. Well, it could have happened to anybody, couldn't it? At least that's what the jury decided. They acquitted her. Just up the Strand from the hotel, a similar story has been titillating coach parties in recent years. And the Savoy didn't just have the murderous beauties, it had all that jazz too. Jazz was the music of working-class black America, but it was popularised in this country by white men in dinner suits, danced to at the Savoy by nice girls from good county families. When the Savoy Havana Band and the Savoy Orpheans played in this ballroom back in the 1920s, they were as fresh in their own way as the Sex Pistols were in 1977. The Savoy took a big risk replacing the usual hotel style of string quartets with the dangerous new dance music. But the new sounds proved so successful, soon every hotel wanted a jazz band, while dance music from the Savoy was one of the first hit radio shows for the new British Broadcasting Company. Millions heard the sounds that only a privileged few could dance to here. The music wasn't the real thing. It was softened and anglicised for mass-market consumption. Authenticity wasn't really a concern. Take Roberto Inglés. It didn't matter that he'd been born plain Bob Ingalls and grew up in Scotland rather than Havana. He was such a big star, this crowd is waiting to mob him outside the hotel. Amazingly, Scott's Bob was huge in South America as well. When he emigrated to Chile, they welcomed him like a long-lost son. Dance music and the Savoy were good for each other. The hotel made jazz respectable, while jazz reinvented the hotel's status as a fashionable destination for a whole new generation. Other opportunities for getting stylishly wasted were provided, as they still are today, by the American bar. In 1920, a real live Yankee named Harry Craddock rolled up in town, eager to practice the skills which prohibition had outlawed in his native land. His Savoy cocktail book is still in print 8 decades later. One man who knew Craddock personally is Joe Gilmore. He eventually became the Savoy's head barman himself. Now retired, Joe started work in the Savoy aged 18 in 1940.
I was just a boy then, of course. I used to serve Mr. Churchill quite a lot in those days. And General Eisenhower. White ladies are.
Thank you. So who did you make this for then?
In those days, I mean, the white lady is very, very popular. Lauren Hardy, and that was one of the drinks that they had. All right?
Good, very good. This is a pussyfoot.
That's pussyfoot. George Bernard Shaw used to have that because he didn't drink.
Right.
I think
there's no alcohol in it,
I think in his young days he had enough, he said, in his young days, and so he didn't drink when I knew him.
Frank Sinatra was a regular here, wasn't he?
Yes, he was, yes. He used to like his dry martini cocktail. With a zest of lemon on it, but not the lemon dropped in, just the zest over the top.
You must have got through a lot of vodka.
And vodka was never sold at all. I think it sold 1 bottle of vodka a year up until the middle of 1950s. Earl Flynn was the only one who had it in my days. He had it with red pepper on top and knocked it right back.
Just to prove how hard he was.
died young.
He did, didn't he? Yes, yes, but looking rather old. Yeah. The lure of a good white Russian and a Corby trouser press brought the cream of Hollywood to the Savoy. The hotel had a lot more than 5 stars, not to mention their groupies. Sorry, Mr. Hudson, is it not what you ordered?
A single table here in the Savoy Grill was once the favourite of Aristotle Onassis and Maria Callas, and Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, and Alexander Korda, and Prince Rainier of Monaco and Grace Kelly. Wouldn't it have been good to see them all fighting over it after they all trolled in on the same night? With so many famous guests, the staff would have found it difficult to keep track. I mean, imagine how embarrassing it would have been if Frank Sinatra's espresso machine had been delivered to Gina Lollobrigid's boudoir. So the hotel kept notes on everyone who came to stay.
A whole synod of 20th century icons, reduced to a list of requests for flowers and soap. A dozen pink roses and a bottle of fizz were a sure way to prevent Marlene Dietrich having a hissy fit. But the days have passed when Hollywood stars cantered round the ballroom or John Wayne made small talk with the page boys. Today's celebrities are more likely to be snapped at newer hotels, names like the Sanderson, the Mandarin Oriental or the Metropolitan. Now they're the places stalked by night watchmen with cameras and flash guns. The Savoy itself is now part of a global chain, albeit a 5-star one. The new corporate owners are investing millions of pounds in refurbishment, but it's a long way from the hotel's origins as an offshoot of London's theatrical life. It's hard to imagine the Saudi prince, who's the current major shareholder, whooping it up at the opening night of the Pirates of Penzance.
The cliché about hotels is that they're the places where people come to do the nice and nasty things that they wouldn't dare do at home. I think that used to be true of the Savoy. It offered comforts and pleasures like no other hotel had offered before. It turned itself into a theatre of raucous indecency. But now all the hedonists have gone elsewhere. You wouldn't come here to murder your husband or to seduce the page boys. The sets are dazzling, but the show is over.